right, so let's talk about this. With me now is Nicole Hannah-Jones, a staff writer for the New York Times Magazine, Jennifer Carroll, former Florida Lieutenant Governor and a Donald Trump supporter, and Angela Rye, a CNN political commentator and former executive director of the Congressional Black Caucus. Welcome to all of you.
Thank you, Carol.
Thanks for being here. I want to focus on North Carolina first because the NAACP in that state filed a lawsuit Monday over black voter suppression. A federal appeals court accused Republicans of an almost surgical assault on black turnout. According to the New York Times, black voters had only one polling place to cast a ballot in Guilford County, North Carolina. In 2012, there were 16 locations. So, Jennifer, is Mr. Trump right? Is the election rigged?
Well, during election times, we always have some irregularities in the voting process. And this is nothing new this election cycle. But when you talked about the voter suppression, I would like every black voter to turn out and vote. Marcus Garvey, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, Harriet Tubman, Frederick Douglass will be appalled at the voter turnout that we are seeing in recent times with black voters. There are lots at stake, much for our communities, economics, education, safety and security. So black voters need to be a part of the process that's going to bring about a change and a difference for their communities.
So Angela, is it a problem with voter suppression, or is it enthusiasm among black voters that's the problem?
I think you have a combined effect, Carol. There are some folks who aren't enthusiastic and even less enthusiastic after they've heard Donald Trump at rallies talking about he needs poll watchers from his rallies. And we know what kind of folks end up going to Donald Trump rallies sometimes in places like St. Louis, in Chicago, in Philadelphia. That is effectively voter intimidation. It's so interesting to hear the former lieutenant governor talk about Malcolm X and Marcus Garvey and Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman. I'm sure they would be woefully ashamed of what Florida has done to felons in disenfranchising their votes. I'm sure they would be horribly ashamed at the fact that Donald Trump was at a rally in Sanford, Florida, and talked about black people getting shot, going to get a loaf of bread outside of their homes, Carol. And of course, we know that Sanford, Florida is the same place where this vigilante, George Zimmerman, shot and killed Trayvon Martin. Black people are issue voters. We want to be mobilized and motivated by the issues. We've seen black voters turn out and take over state's attorneys who had not prosecuted police officers for police brutality, excessive force, and killing black people. Those are the kinds of things that we need to be talking about during this election, and not quoting Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass in this shameful way.
I want to go back to this issue of voter intimidation because there's a headline on Politico this morning, and this is the headline. It says, "White nationalists plot election day show of force." And an excerpt from the article, quote, "The Oath Keepers, a group of former law enforcement and military members that often shows up in public heavily armed, is advising members to go undercover and conduct intelligence gathering at polling places. And Donald Trump ally Roger Stone is organizing his own exit polling, aiming to monitor thousands of precincts across the country." I'm going to ask you about that in a second, Jennifer, but I wanted to ask Nicole, do you believe that sort of thing will happen?
I think it's possible. I don't think that that's what's affecting the vote. And I actually would like to correct one thing about black voting patterns. We know in 2008 and 2012, black Americans actually voted at the highest rate of any group of voters, and particularly black women. So I think we shouldn't say that black people, that our ancestors would be disappointed at voting patterns. Black people have voted at very high rates. I think it's understandable that following the election of the first black president, you don't have those same historic rates, but we also know that we're likely seeing some of the results of the different voter ID laws and other tactics that have occurred in the last few years.
So what's happening in North Carolina is a real concern in your mind?
I think that when you look at the loss of voter precincts and places that people can vote, I think that you're clearly going to see an impact on that.
Okay, so Jennifer, I did want to ask you about this Politico article. Do you really believe that this group called the Oath Keepers will show up at polling places and they'll be gathering intelligence? And is Roger Stone really going to send people out en masse to polling stations?
Well, I have no idea about that. People can say one thing and do something else, but I do want to make the correction that of recent times in the primary election and this general election, we're seeing lower voter turnout of African Americans. And that is concerning because of the 2008 and the 2012 election, we had such a mass turnout and an involvement in blacks being involved in a political process.
But Jennifer, might this sort of thing be a reason why?
Well, I think it's the enthusiasm for both candidates. People are not as enthused with Hillary Clinton, with her past record of 20, 30 years of not really supporting African Americans and their issues,
That's
looking
not
at her
true.
calling black super predators and supporting incarceration of black males more so than white males, looking at her support for white immigrants over black immigrants. I'm an immigrant. She doesn't talk about the Haitian immigrants, the Caribbean immigrants, the African immigrants in supporting their numbers in the amount of drone numbers that she's talking about the Syrian refugees. And these are people that she's called never do well, professional never do well for those type of immigrants. And these people come into our country and create business. Their cultures enhance the economics in our communities. So I don't see where she supported school choice for our parents to have an opportunity to
Carol.
extract their kids from failing schools to have a better choice. And so, therefore, the economy and the jobs and the safety and security for our black communities have been failing throughout the years.
Carol.
Angela?
I have to respond to something. Lieutenant Governor, with all due respect, I'm just trying to figure out where this black support that you're talking about was when Stand Your Ground was taking black people out. Where were you for Marissa Alexander? Where were you for Trayvon Martin? It is so interesting to me that now all of a sudden you are a black militant, former Lieutenant Governor, and you have a horrible record at defending people of color. I am very interested to see something different from you besides this lip service that you are giving to us right now.
Well, it's not lip service because I chaired the task force for Stand Your Ground in the state of Florida. And the Marissa Alexander and the Trayvon Martin case were two separate incidents with regards to the Stand Your provision. Also, as a state representative, I I supported and sponsored legislation for black business growth and development in the state of Florida. I supported funding the historical black colleges at the time where they were on a veto block. I supported for having Black Male Explorers program to teach black males how it would be in a college environment to encourage them to go to college and supported funding. And
I want to bring it back to the election for just a second. So I'm going to direct this question here because Nicole has written a very interesting article actually in the New York Times Magazine about how some of the things that Donald Trump says does resonate within the black community.
I think that we often don't like the messenger, but clearly when Donald Trump is criticizing Democratic leadership in terms of black racial disparities, I think that that is something that a lot of black Americans have talked about for a long time, is feeling that because Republican candidates often seem opposed to civil rights, they're forced to vote for Democrats, but oftentimes Democrats take black Americans for granted.
So maybe, Angela, the things that Donald Trump says about the African-American community and the things he says about Democrats not really being very helpful within those communities doesn't mean that African-Americans will vote for Donald Trump, but may mean that they're not as enthusiastic to go out and vote for Hillary Clinton either.
I think that's certainly the case, Carol. I think you do have an issue of enthusiasm, but I think more of that issue now is what we're seeing. We're seeing an FBI that hasn't been particularly fair in the last couple of days. We are seeing the fact that voter suppression is alive and well, even after Shelby v. Holder. We're seeing the fact that people don't want us to turn out in the numbers that we did in 2008 and 2012. And black voter participation even in 2012 went down a little bit from 2008. Those are the issues facing us. We're just trying to live and thrive in this country, and that is why I challenged the lieutenant governor the way that I did. Black people are trying to fight for the right to live, not just earn wages, not just get support for their business, not just have better and stronger schools, but just the right to life. Just the right to life. That's a big issue. That's a big issue, and they have to believe. We have to believe in the system, and right now that's been challenged.
So Jennifer, last word, because it doesn't appear that Donald Trump is inspiring many African Americans to go to the polls for him, although we don't know that yet because Election Day has not arrived. But your final thoughts?
Correct. It could be an assumption, but at least he's trying and he's making an appeal. And he's the only Republican presidential candidate in my lifetime to make a direct appeal to the African American voters and address their issues and make a statement that he will work with the African American communities to fix the issues that have been impeding them for so many years. And I give him props for that.
All right. Thanks so much for all of you being here.